Hey, thanks for having me. My name's Axel Moehrenschlager. I'm based in Canada. I'm the chair of the IUCN Species Survival Commission Conservation Translocation Specialist Group. And it's a real privilege for me to be here for this workshop because this is part of my learning journey. I'm going to tell you. I was learning a lot in Rome last year when we had our first International Plant Conservation Translocation Conference. And I say that because I'm just going to come and just, you know, expose my whatever ineptitude in the sense that I'm not a botanist by background. I'm so sorry. Don't chase me out of the room. But that's it. That's what's so exciting, I think, is when we're learning. And one of the things in the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group that I've been absolutely adamant about and made sort of a mission of mine is to bring together sort of the animal and plant worlds, if you will, in this discipline. And that's reflected in some ways in talks that we just had at this conference as well and previous ones. And the reason for that is because, well, I mean, why would we care more for one kind of species than another, and why would we think we can't sort of learn from each other?
Sorry, Axel.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So, just by introduction, our vision in the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group is a world where courageous action repairs nature's past damage and guards against threats of the future. And our mission is to empower responsible conservation translocations that save species, strengthen ecosystems, and benefit humanity. So it's very deliberate in the aspiration in terms of saying, okay, you know, there are a lot of challenges. We've lost a lot of habitats. We've had, you know, sort of damage from the past, and we would like to repair that. But actually, it's not just about going backwards to the past. It's also being proactive, trying to get ready, trying to embrace the challenges of the future, such as climate change and other aspects. So we want to be forward-facing, and basically, as an IUCN group, you know, I see our primary function to help empower others however we can, wherever we can. It doesn't mean that others necessarily need help. It's certainly, we're busy enough that we don't need to, you know, look for places to impose ourselves. But if there are ways that we can be helpful, that's kind of our philosophy. And so we made a very ambitious 10-year strategy that you can find on the website of the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group. And it's pushing to try and elevate on what I see as 6 connected pillars. And that's science, guidance, policy, training, action, and outreach. If it's like, what do we need to do to help save species with this tool? To me, it's those 6 things. It's not just science, and it's not just, you know, action and practice. No, it's actually a circle of how those things connect and how we elevate through that. So I was just having a look. I mean, it's a pretty succinct document. You can get through it in 10 or 15 minutes. It has pictures, so it's not a horrible strategic plan. That was kind of my point. The other point was I was trying to engage you know, potential funders with it as well. But I just would go through the different sections sort of in preparation for this to see, is there any potential synergy? So basically I'm not advocating for anything, I'm just sort of asking the questions, and we can have discussions on any of these aspects. One of them is that we actually have, as you might know, we have an amazing series of case study books. They're edited by our program officer who's based in the Emirates. He's put out 6 already, and there's over 400 case studies. And what's really wonderful about it is, you know, many of us will be very used to publishing in the primary literature in journals and stuff like that. What's wonderful about it is you only get like 4 small pages, and you just have to, you only get, you know, 100, 200 words to introduce your topic, to state your objective, to say what you did, and to give a succinct relevance and outcome. And you're only allowed 5 references for all of those that like to have 50 references. And I say it in that way because it makes that content very focused and engaging. The other thing that it does actually is that that it's been engaging in terms of being able to have contributions from more areas of the world, if you will, because people, you know, from even non-English speaking countries and such can engage with this, and we help them. Those books have been extensively mined through meta-analyses and great papers and such. Again, on the sort of ongoing mission that I have to try and bring things together, I'm glad that while it's still not representative of biodiversity, the last book has had the highest proportion of plant case studies in it, and we're working on the new one. So if you're interested in having a case study in these books, think about it, and you can talk to me about it. It's actually quite easy to do. I reflect on a former staff member of mine who said, why is it that this chapter that she did on frogs is, you know, highly read on ResearchGate and well cited compared to my peer-reviewed paper that I just put out? It's just like, well, actually, because people actually read them, you know, it's sorry to say. But so that's one possibility for example, to have more case studies from this region, and it'll go in the theme of some other things I'm going to say. Another one is in terms of science. Of course, you know, there's amazing science, some of the world's best science that comes from this region. And so you don't need to necessarily have an interaction in terms of IUCN or such. But in some cases, it's a very good alignment, because by bringing the two together, you take or you position the lessons that are learned here in a more global context. And this is something that, as I was saying, that I'm sort of referring to, is how can we scale or elevate the amazing knowledge that's created here, the capacity to go even further abroad. Now, many of you are probably working in other countries as well, but even the things that are focused here, how can we take this amazing capacity and have it be, you know, collaborative across borders? One of the things that blew my mind on the animal side is I was in Vietnam about half a year ago to help on potential translocations of 15 endangered species. And I realized, like after a couple of days of meeting with government and such and scientists, that there were no precedents of any conservation translocation program for animals anyway, anywhere in the country. Like you know, you want to come and say, what's your issue, and let's make a plan and all this kind of stuff, and you know, let's go forward and put a program together. But we couldn't even have the discussion because there wasn't a policy framework to allow it, a regulator to approve it, this sort of thing. And they just didn't even have the expertise. So I'm not sure if it's better on the plant side, but I'm sure there's a lot of, you know, diverse or heterogeneity or whatever across the world in terms of expertise. So here, for instance, I mean, we put out a book, Conservation Translocations just came out, University of Cambridge Press. We have, I think, a reasonable balance geographically, taxonomically. Sarah and Dalrymple, Joyce, you know, others have chapters in it as well. And then we have this special issue that Sarah and Thomas Abelli and others have just put out as well. And so they're, of course, experts in their own right, but they're also leaders within the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group. So is there more of this potential synergy? There's a couple special issues that have come out on different animal topics, but again, there could be issues, special issues, all sorts of science that comes out that's aligned with or encouraged by or better disseminated through the IUCN with you. You know, we had the amazing conference in Italy last year. It's interesting because even when I was at this conference here, I was amazed to hear of people that were talking about tuning in from elsewhere, right? And like you were saying, because it was a nice hybrid format, it was still under COVID, but it wasn't just being in Rome, it was all the people online presenting from Asia and such. And so one of the things is we don't know when and where the next one would be. And the organizer, Thomas Abelli, of the first one, he's encouraging the thought, you know? He's sort of asking the question, you know, where do we go now? What should we do? Is there value in this? And I said, I think there's tremendous value in this. Even if we have global conferences that are both about plants and animals, the focus in this and the level of discussion is higher, more complex, more advanced than in the more general scope. So is Australia the next place to have it? Or is it, I was just in South Africa a month ago, I was thinking about the highly biodiverse plant areas there. Is that the place to have it? But why not Australia to have the next one? I don't know, in a year or 2 or 3, I don't know. Make it happen. and I don't say that in a neglecting way. Is if you want to work together to try and make that happen, to raise money and stuff to do it here, that'd be great. In terms of guidance, we have in the strategic plan to collaborate with others to develop targeted guidelines for conservation translocations of corals and building upon excellent regional models. I was thinking of Australia, for instance, for plants. And this came from the fact that we have these global guidelines for any species that we develop, but then in some cases people would develop taxon-specific ones, even for rhinos or things like that. So is there a need, is there a value to have guidelines that basically come closer even to a specific species? And the reason I put the emphasis here, it wasn't just me, it was together with 15 others. The reason we put the emphasis here on plants is because it just wasn't there in an international space. So you have some of the best guidelines in the world. I think Joyce was saying they're the best. And so, but one of the things about it is kind of like when we had a reintroduction book that came out of Oceania. Just the title on it makes it that, because it's about, you know, conservation translocations in Oceania, then people from Europe and such don't pick it up. But so is there a way to take these excellent guidelines that you have here and frame them or disseminate them or bring them across to others that they can learn better from you as well? In terms of policy, one of the things I've been working on very, very strongly is the idea of incorporating guidelines into regulation or policy. So guidelines are guidelines, right? They can be helpful. I mean, the IUCN guidelines are used all over the world. You see it referred to all the time. But you don't have to follow it. It's just a guideline, and that's okay. But in some cases, actually, maybe one goes deeper than that. So, for instance, now we have them incorporated into the National Code for Scotland, for England, US Department of Interior, Canada Wildlife Directors, and we're going to have a Brazilian code, or a Brazilian code is just coming out, working on Vietnam, Pakistan, and such. And the point is that if best practice, as expressed by guidelines, is actually articulated into regulations and maybe even law, then it's like, hey, you know, you have to do best practice. Like when we had this happen in Canada, suddenly folks would contact us from government especially saying, we have to follow this thing. We don't know what it is. Can you please help train us? How can we be better? So is there any opportunity to, I don't know, have official acceptance of guidelines? And it can be in different ways. It can be saying, you must follow these guidelines. That's pretty strong. It can be, you should follow these guidelines, or we recommend you follow these guidelines. Any of these things coming from regulators or government are very powerful, actually, in terms of expectations to the conservation community, but also to, for instance, industry and other practitioners. And so I have here the policy alignment with zoos. I just say that because to set up the next one. Initiate policy alignment with botanical gardens globally. And I know the Director General of the BGCI very well. He's on one of our task forces, Paul Smith. And so, again, I think in the plant community, there's actually a more unified, if you will, approach than for zoos, and I've worked in zoos for a long time. But basically, can one go from just having, like, for zoos, what's happened is different zoo associations have made it their mandate or expectations that any of their constituents follow the guidelines for instance, releases of animals from zoos. Training. Yeah, I think it's really important to not just produce guidelines, but actually to put it into practice in terms of training. It's really, really difficult, I think, for a lot of people to sort of get their head around it. You know, we all learn in different ways. Some of us are great just reading something, but then we actually conducted a 4-day training course here before our big conference, where we actually apply decision-making tools to help people, and we workshop through case studies and scenarios to see how does this actually work, how can you apply it. So is there ways, or maybe it's already happening here, that one can align on this. One of the things in terms of the third point is I'm really keen on online training, and that's because while we as a leadership team are moving around, I was just in Brazil a couple months ago and we had excellent training course there too. While we do that, we only have so much capacity, and others will only have so much resource and such to come to these kinds of things. So my dream is to not only have online training, but an online certification system by which you basically, you learn something, you get tested on it, you get certified, and it means something that you're proud of, and maybe your employer is proud of, or is valued in different ways. And then to empower a network of trade alumni. So so we just initiated with sort of short snippets. This isn't taxon specific, it's just about how to do translocation planning in a structured decision-making way. So we have initial modules on our website now, and they're meant to be short. They're like 5 to 15 minutes, so that just to give an introduction, but we want to expand this, and we'd love to do it. I mean, we've done in-person training also with government organizations like Natural England, with practitioners, but the online reach we want to expand. Is there any alignment for that here in Australia? I don't know. I hope so. And then, just being quick, to continually engage government agencies, funding organizations, and other conservation groups to support capacity building. And responsible conservation translocations, which is a word that I use emphatically, passionately, and we could all debate what that means. But basically, it's using best practice as best as possible. And then one of the things that we're looking at, and I haven't initiated yet, is developing an award program that recognizes excellence. However, we will define it in different levels, like maybe it's for emerging leaders, maybe it's for certain areas of the world. We're not there yet, but these are all sort of aspirations that we have. And then we would announce those awards at conferences such as we just had. And one special interest of ours is on species that are extinct in the wild. Sarah and I are on an extinct in the wild task force that we formed within the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group. If you look it up, we've been publishing well and wide, and had a couple lovely papers in Diversity and Science this year that gives just an overview of the state of extinct in the wild species. So what is it that we can do? Because I think, for me, saving species, the more endangered, critically endangered, extinct in the wild the species is, the more the recovery of it means. And I don't mean that in what is the value of this species. For me, it's kind of like in the big game, does conservation work and win or not? Does it get outpaced? Does it get attention? Does it not? So when we take the most difficult situations and we can accomplish wins, that means something. We can take that to policymakers, to funders, to inspire the general public. Like if we save things right on the brink of extinction, which those species are that are extinct in the wild, which in many cases now learn about the seed bank here and such, are even in tiny little collections. If we can save the ones that are hardest to save, then we can make that amazing and amplify that story. And then basically we want to provide advice, mentorship, planning, and or political support to benefit conservation translocations for at least 300 species across that 10-year time frame. And finally, in terms of outreach, and I regret this wording, I apologize for it, is I had to launch a task force aimed at increasing the ethical and respectful integration of Indigenous culture, values, and knowledge into conservation translocation practice. So I apologize for the word integration. It's not my intention. For me, and I've published on this, it's very much about authentic, respectful co-management on different or aligned values, which might have to do with biodiversity, ecological function, but also culture and spirituality. And to facilitate mentorship and involve youth in conservation translocations. And finally, to just invite community leaders, celebrities, donors, political leaders to participate in and advocate for the escalation of these activities. I don't know the plant side as well, but on the animal side, in terms of conservation, I often say my favorite conservation translocation is one you never need to do. That's perfect. That's the one I want. If you do it, and in terms of the animal side, it's also not the most important issue in the world, I think. You know, there's climate change, there's plastics, there's, you know, whatever. But I'm convinced, as far as I've seen, it's the most engaging one in terms of the public eye, in terms of politicians, in terms of like having dealt with ministers, having dealt with big donors and such, the fact that you're actually taking action, not just to make the world bad less quickly, but actually to make it better again, to restore it, is quite powerful and engaging. And this is why I mean that even resources, in the broad sense, I think are not limited. We just need to get more people to be engaged. Many want to be. I deal with a lot of philanthropists and stuff. They just don't know, you know, and they want to be engaged. And I'd probably love to go out in the field with you and do some oak planting or something like that. It'd be, you know, the highlight of their day, and they go and tell their rich friends about it. Anyway, I'm not just making this stuff up because I have experienced it. So we need to get better at sharing the joy and the of what we do. Yeah.